Welcome to BitBlitz Horror, where we delve into the darkest recesses of human imagination. Tonight, we're exploring a chilling tale of Arctic isolation and scientific curiosity gone terribly wrong. Get ready for the freezing science experiment, a story that will make you question the limits of nature and humanity. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button if you dare. Now, let's dim the lights and begin our journey into the frozen unknown. Freezing science experiment. The biting wind howled across the desolate tundra, carrying with it tiny ice crystals that stung my exposed skin like 1,000 microscopic needles. I squinted through the whiteout conditions, barely able to make out the outline of my research station, a small, prefabricated building that stood as the only sign of human presence for hundreds of miles in any direction. My name is Dr. Ethan Frost, and I had been sent to this godforsaken corner of the Arctic Circle to conduct a series of experiments on the effects of extreme cold on various biological samples. The research was groundbreaking, potentially paving the way for new methods of cryogenic preservation. But as I trudged through the knee-deep snow, I couldn't help but wonder if the cost was worth it. I reached the door of the station, my gloved hands fumbling with the keypad. As I punched in the code, I glanced over my shoulder, an irrational fear gripping me. Out here, in this vast emptiness, it felt like something was always watching, waiting. The lock disengaged with a satisfying click, and I stumbled inside, grateful for the relative warmth. I shed my heavy outer layers and made my way to the lab, my mind already racing with the day's tasks. The lab was state-of-the-art, a stark contrast to the brutal simplicity of the Arctic landscape outside. Rows of gleaming equipment lined the walls, and in the center stood the crown jewel of our operation, a massive cryogenic chamber, capable of reaching temperatures far below anything found naturally on Earth. I began my work, meticulously preparing samples and recording data. Hours passed, and as the perpetual twilight of the Arctic winter deepened outside, I found myself lost in the rhythm of scientific inquiry. It was nearly midnight when I heard it, a sound so out of place in this sterile environment that at first, I was sure I had imagined it. A soft, wet slapping noise, like bare feet on a tile floor. I froze, my pen hovering above my notebook. The sound came again, closer this time. My heart began to race as I slowly turned towards the door of the lab. Nothing. The hallway beyond was dark and empty. I shook my head, trying to clear the cobwebs of fatigue that must have been playing tricks on my mind. I turned back to my work, determined to finish the last set of samples before calling it a night. But as I reached for the next petri dish, I noticed something strange. The sample inside, a small piece of organic tissue we had been testing, was moving. Not the gentle pulsing we had observed in some of our more successful experiments, but a violent, writhing motion that seemed almost desperate. I leaned in closer, my scientific curiosity overriding my sense of unease. The tissue was changing color, shifting from a healthy pink to a sickly gray before my eyes. And then, to my horror, it began to grow. I stumbled backward, knocking over a tray of instruments in my haste. The clatter echoed through the lab, but it was drowned out by a new sound, a high-pitched keening that seemed to be coming from the mutating sample. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This was impossible. We had tested these samples dozens of times, and nothing like this had ever happened. What had changed? And then it hit me, the storm. The freak blizzard that had been raging for days, driving temperatures to record lows. Had we accidentally stumbled upon some threshold, some point at which the laws of biology as we knew them simply broke? I didn't have time to ponder the implications. The sample was now the size of a fist, pulsating with an otherworldly light. I had to contain it, had to stop whatever was happening before it spread. With shaking hands, I reached for the containment unit, designed to handle biohazardous materials. But as my fingers closed around the handle, the lights in the lab flickered and died. For a moment, I stood in total darkness, the only illumination coming from the eerie glow of the mutated sample. And then, with a sound like cracking ice, the backup generator kicked in, bathing the lab in the harsh glare of emergency lighting. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the sudden brightness. And that's when I saw them, dozens of similar growths, sprouting from every surface of the lab. They pulsed in unison, a grotesque symphony of unnatural life. Panic gripped me. I had to get out, had to call for help. I turned to run, but my foot slipped on something slick on the floor. I went down hard, the wind knocked out of me. As I gasped for air, I realized with growing horror that the slickness beneath me was moving, spreading. I scrambled to my feet, but it was too late. The organic ooze had already begun to climb up my legs, its touch burning like acid through my clothes. I screamed, a primal sound of terror that echoed through the empty station. I clawed at the growth, trying to tear it away, but it only seemed to speed up its advance. In seconds, it had reached my waist, my chest, my neck. With the last of my strength, I lurched towards the door, desperate to escape. But as I reached for the handle, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass. My face was no longer my own. It was a twisted mass of writhing tissue, my features melting and reforming in a nightmarish dance. And in that moment, I understood the true horror of what we had unleashed. This wasn't just a mutation. It was evolution, accelerated to an impossible degree. And it was rewriting me, cell by cell, into something else. The last thing I remember before the darkness took me was the sound of the wind outside, howling like a hungry beast. And I wondered, in that final moment of humanity, if it had been waiting for this all along. Weeks passed before the rescue team arrived. The storm had made communication impossible, and it was only when the research station failed to make its scheduled check-in that anyone realized something was wrong. They found the station silent, covered in a thick layer of ice and snow. Inside, the labs were pristine, showing no signs of the horror I had witnessed. Of me, there was no trace, but as they prepared to leave, to write off the mission as a tragic accident, one of the team members noticed something strange in the snow outside. A trail of footprints, leading away from the station and into the vast white emptiness of the tundra. The prints were like nothing they had ever seen before, a twisted amalgamation of human and something else. They followed the trail for miles, but it eventually disappeared, as if whatever had made it had simply vanished into the Arctic air. The official report blamed the incident on equipment malfunction and the extreme conditions. The research was quietly discontinued, the station dismantled and removed as if it had never existed. But sometimes, on particularly cold nights, the native people of the far north tell stories of a new creature that roams the ice. Something that was once a man, but is now so much more. They say it's still out there, evolving, adapting, waiting for the day when it can share its gift with the rest of the world. And in labs across the globe, scientists continue to push the boundaries of what's possible, unaware that they dance on the edge of an abyss. For in the endless white of the Arctic, a new form of life has been born. And it's hungry. Epilogue. Dr. Amelia Chin stared at the grainy satellite image on her computer screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. She had been tasked with monitoring global temperature anomalies, a routine job that usually involved tracking the effects of climate change. But this was different. The image showed a section of the Arctic tundra, hundreds of miles from the nearest human settlement. At first glance, it looked like any other patch of frozen wasteland. But as Amelia zoomed in, she noticed something odd. A perfect circle of green in the midst of the white expanse. She checked and double-checked her instruments, sure there must be some mistake. But the data was clear. In the middle of the Arctic winter, in temperatures that should make life impossible, something was growing. Amelia's hand shook as she reached for her phone. She had to report this, had to tell someone. But as her fingers hovered over the keypad, A chill ran down her spine. For a split second, she could have sworn she saw movement in that circle of green. Something large, something impossible. She blinked, and the image was static once more. But the seed of doubt had been planted. And as she lowered her hand, leaving the phone untouched, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that she had just glimpsed the beginning of the end. In the frozen wastes of the Arctic, evolution marched on. And the world was not ready for what was coming, the awakening. Months passed, and Dr. Amelia Chin couldn't shake the image of that green circle from her mind. She had kept her discovery secret, torn between her scientific curiosity and a deep-seated fear she couldn't quite explain. But as winter gave way to spring, reports began to trickle in from the far north. Strange sightings, unexplained phenomena, and a growing sense of unease among the indigenous populations. Amelia knew she had to act. Gathering a small team of trusted colleagues, she organized an expedition to the site. As their plane touched down on a makeshift ice runway, Amelia felt a sense of foreboding that only intensified as they approached the coordinates of the anomaly. What they found defied explanation. The circle of green had expanded, now covering several square miles. But it wasn't grass or any recognizable plant life. It was a writhing mass of organic matter, pulsing with an inner light that seemed to mock the pallid Arctic sun. As the team set up their equipment, Amelia noticed something else. The air was warm, almost humid. It was as if they had stepped into a tropical greenhouse rather than one of the coldest places on Earth. "Dr. Chin!" one of her colleagues called out, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "You need to see this!" Amelia rushed over, her heart pounding. At the edge of the organic mass, something was emerging. At first, it looked like a hand, reaching up from the ground. But as it pulled itself free, Amelia realized with horror that it was both more and less than human. The creature stood on two legs, but its body was a patchwork of textures and forms, fur, scales, and something that looked disturbingly like human skin. Its face was a constantly shifting mass, features appearing and disappearing as if it couldn't decide on a final form. And then it spoke. "Welcome," it said, its voice a chorus of tones and timbres. "We've been waiting for you." Amelia stumbled backward, her mind reeling. What are you?" she managed to choke out. The creature's face settled into a semblance of a smile. "We are the future," it said. "The next step in evolution. And you, Dr. Chin, are here to witness our awakening." As if on cue, the ground began to tremble. All around them, more creatures were emerging from the organic mass. Some looked almost human, while others were so alien that Amelia's mind struggled to comprehend them. "You see," the first creature continued, "your colleague, Dr. Frost, made a wonderful discovery. He found the key to unlocking our potential. And now, we're ready to share that gift with the world." Amelia's blood ran cold as she realized the full implications of what she was seeing. This wasn't just a localized phenomenon. It was the beginning of a transformation that could reshape life on Earth. "Please," she begged, "you don't have to do this. We can work together, find a way to." The creature cut her off with a wave of its ever-changing hand. "It's already done," it said. "The process cannot be stopped. But don't worry, Dr. Chin. You'll understand soon enough. You'll be part of us." As if to emphasize its point, tendrils of the organic mass began to creep towards the research team. Amelia's colleagues screamed, trying to run, but there was nowhere to go. The living carpet spread faster than they could move, engulfing everything in its path. Amelia felt the tendrils wrap around her legs, burning through her protective gear as if it were tissue paper. She wanted to scream, to fight, but a strange calm was settling over her. As the organic matter crept up her body, she felt her mind expanding, connecting with something vast and incomprehensible. In her last moments of individual consciousness, Amelia understood. This was more than evolution. It was transcendence. The barriers between species, between individual organisms, were dissolving. In their place was rising a new form of life, one that could adapt to any environment, overcome any obstacle. As the transformation completed, the being that had once been Amelia Chin looked out over the Arctic landscape with new eyes. It saw not a barren wasteland, but a blank canvas, ready to be reshaped. And far to the south, in labs and homes and cities across the globe, the first spores of change were already taking root. The world as humanity knew it was ending, but something new and wondrous was about to begin. The creature smiled, its form shifting and changing with each passing second. The Great Awakening had begun, and there was no going back. In the endless white of the Arctic, a new epoch of Earth's history was dawning. And as the organic mass continued to spread, consuming and transforming everything in its path, one thing became clear. The age of humanity was over. The age of infinite adaptation had begun.